Hey there, this is Erica Kelley, and you're listening to the podcast Southern Fried True Crime. This show covers cases that may not be suitable for young listeners, and there may also be some explicit language used. Listener discretion is advised. On a chilly evening in April of 2013, police officers were called out to 64 Governor's Way in Brentwood, Tennessee for a welfare check on Rachael and Randy Maidens. The shades were drawn and no one answered their pounding at the doors. They managed to enter the home through an open garage door where they continued calling out for Rachael and Randy. But a small child was the only one to answer. She was upstairs crying, "I'm here, I'm here." Officer Austin Kern went upstairs to find her. 2-year-old Natalie Maidens was alone but unharmed in a crib, crying repeatedly, "Daddy gone, Daddy gone." He picked up the little girl and secured her with an officer outside before returning to finish his search. It didn't take long to find the carnage this little girl was left alone in. Brentwood, Tennessee is a suburb about 20 minutes from Nashville, known for its beautiful rolling hills and for being one of the wealthiest cities in America. It is partly located in Davidson County and partly in Williamson, which is the 16th wealthiest county in the nation. It is also predominantly white. Of its about 40,000 citizens, almost 90% are white. There have only been 8 homicides in the city's history since it was incorporated in 1969. I won't throw all of the statistics at you, but basically, it is safer than about 74% of the rest of the country. Along with that safeness and security, the beautiful city with a feel for country living boasts over 10 parks, luxury shopping, fine dining, and close proximity to Nashville, which attracts many celebrities. Taylor Swift, Jack White, Sheryl Crow, Ashley Judd, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman, just to name a few, and also many former and current Tennessee Titans and Nashville Predators, including Mike Fisher and his wife Carrie Underwood, and also other music industry players from studio managers to CEOs. Brentwood's business district is also home to many corporate headquarters like Hobby Lobby, Tractor Supply, AT&T, and Sony. With its exclusivity and 20-minute drive from Nashville, you can certainly see the attraction for the wealthy and those seeking privacy. 64 Governor's Way, the home of Rachael and Randy Maidens, is located in a gated country club community. 600 rolling acres on the award-winning private Arnold Palmer golf course known as the Governor's Club. One of the richest, most exclusive, and of course fancy neighborhoods in Brentwood. The Maidens lived in a sprawling 5,000 square foot mansion worth almost $1 million. It would seem like the ideal place to raise a family and own a business. Dr. Rachael Elizabeth Frisbie Maidens was a 34-year-old orthodontist with her own private practice. RM Orthodontics and Family Dentistry was located in Maryland Farms, the elite business district of Brentwood. She was blonde, brilliant, beautiful, and a devoted mother to her daughter Natalie. She graduated from Father Ryan High School, a private Catholic school in Nashville, and then went to college at Birmingham Southern, a private liberal arts college in Alabama, before attending dental school at the University of Florida. At Birmingham Southern, she earned all-conference and all-American academic honors in tennis while earning magna cum laude in biology and psychology. She also earned the prestigious Steinheiser Scholarship while at UFCD, while serving as class president for her leadership and commitment to community. She completed her orthodontic residency at the Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. And, of course, she went on to have a very distinguished career at a young age, where aside from owning her own practice, she wrote for professional journals and was a popular speaker at conferences. Rachael's resume is exemplary by any standard, but especially so when you learn that she had suffered a tragedy during her college years. On December 3, 2003, her father, Dr. Richard Maidens, who was a respected pharmacist, was arrested by federal agents for selling OxyContin to a DEA informant. He was also accused of selling prescription drugs from their family home. He never went to court, though, taking his own life 2 days after the arrest. And the nightmare for the Frisbie family continued as Metro Police seized Rachael's, her mother's, and her brother's bank accounts for her father's crimes. This ordeal of an investigation lasted years, and before it was settled, Metro had to pay the Frisbies an additional $15,000 in compensation. God only knows what emotional effect this had on Rachael, but she didn't allow it to derail her education or her career. I think she was a natural overachiever, but I also think she wanted to be the best, make her own money, and be accountable only to herself, fortifying herself with her own wealth and success for protection. She had survived a horrible family loss and almost financial ruin, and I bet she thought she finally had control of her life. But there was one thing she couldn't control, and that was the darkness within her husband, who shot her to death inside their beautiful home while her daughter was in the house. Randolph Cary Maidens, son of Charles and Barbara, was originally from St. Louis but grew up in Georgia. He graduated from Wheeler High School in Marietta and then Georgia Tech College. He was a pharmaceutical sales manager for Dendreon Corporation in Brentwood. It's a biotech company that mainly focuses on cancer research. However, he was rumored to be unemployed when he murdered his wife, though Dendreon has been very vigilant in not confirming this or commenting on this case at all. But it makes sense to me that he was, considering his behavior leading up to the murder. But more on Dendreon later. Looking back in just the 3 months before he killed Rachael, Randy had an alarming change in personality. He was in a raging alcoholic spiral that was probably mixed with other drugs. In January, witnesses at Brick's Cafe said Randy stumbled into the restaurant, visibly drunk, making customers and staff uncomfortable. A female employee called 911.
I just had a gentleman walk in, and he seems pretty intoxicated. I can't tell if he's drunk or if he's on something else. I'm afraid to serve him first off, but I'm afraid to let him leave.
All the employees at Brick's later identified the man in the call as Randy Maidens. The 911 operator sent a police officer towards the restaurant, but before the officer could get there, the same employee called back even more concerned. She said that when he stood up and pulled some stuff out of his pocket, a shotgun shell fell out, and he picked it up and put it back in his pocket along with a big bottle of what looked like Tylenol. The employee went on to tell the operator that Randy Maidens had tried to leave, but she convinced him to stay. He told her his wife had called him and he needed to go home, but he would not let her call his wife. Police did show up and searched Randy's car, finding a shotgun in the back seat, but Randy Maidens was not arrested. Instead, witnesses said Rachael Maidens came and picked him up that night. So a rich white man, drunk and armed, causing a scene in a public establishment, was allowed to just call his wife to come and get him. Let that one sink in for you. But the part that really gets to me is everyone also said Randy repeatedly asked that no one call his wife because she'd be mad at him. We found out later that he considered himself a victim of his wife's wrath, though I think she had more than enough reason to be angry with him. And of course, this is speculation. We can't really know what was going on in their marriage, though there may have been signs. But I think he was a screw-up and she knew it. What we do know is that on April 21st, 2013, Rachael's mother, Betty, called the Brentwood Police Department requesting they go check on her daughter. Some reports say she told the police Randy was suicidal, but most reports reveal that she told him if he didn't put Rachael on the phone in 10 minutes, she would call the police. It is unclear what prompted this call with Betty, but I suspect Randy called her after killing Rachael. I can only imagine what he was saying to her that made her threaten to call the police. Regardless, within minutes, the Brentwood police were at the house and Randy had vanished. Officer Austin Kern testified at an early hearing that after he got Natalie out of the house, he went back upstairs looking for signs of either of the Maidens. He then looked over a balcony railing into a large room on the first floor and saw blood splattered on the wall and a shotgun laying on a couch. Rachael Maidens was found between the foyer and living room area by a hallway leading into the master bedroom. She had been shot 10 times in the back, 8 times with a 9mm handgun and 2 times with a shotgun. Officer Kern testified that she was wrapped in a blanket and there was no question she was dead. He also said there were signs that someone had tried to clean the blood off of the walls and flooring. Randy Maidens was nowhere to be found, and a 12-hour manhunt began, including the TBI, helicopters, and full SWAT team. Frightened neighbors gave quick interviews to reporters on the scene, one pointing out that many side and garage doors of other homes in the Governor's Club were found open. So Randy was possibly running around the neighborhood looking for places to hide. Their alarm was understandable, as Randy was considered armed and dangerous. Back at the scene, officers had found a handwritten note on a kitchen counter. I will have photographs of this note for you to look at on my social media, but the first page of the note reads,
Gigi, I'm sorry for the loss of Rachel and a mom for Natalie. You can't imagine how it hurts me. You are her mom now. I was Rachel's third husband for a reason. She's impossible.
Gigi is what Betty Frisbee's granddaughter called her. I can only assume the note was addressed to her because he had spoken with her on the phone, and also he was possibly closer to Rachel's mother and family than he was his own. Because page 2 of the note is even more telling.
It was a good life. I enjoyed the years until I died, which was on the day 4/11/13. I love Natalie, and I'm sure Gigi will take good care of her, which is my wish. Not my mom, Barbara. Rachel and I never had such good fortune, arguing every day of our life. Last night, Rachel screamed at me, as she does every night of the week I am home. And I finally lost it. I've been putting up with it for 6 years since I met her, and I cannot no longer. I love you, Natalie. I love you, Gigi. I love you, Brent. I love you, Ben, and Sam, and Teresa. Love always, Randy.
There are so many things I could say about this note, but first and foremost, not only was he still blaming his dead wife, but he seems to be appealing directly to her mother, Betty Frisbie. And he only shouts his love in all caps to his daughter and those in Rachel's family, not one mention of anyone in his own immediate family. Except he made a specific dig at his mother, Barbara Maidens, in saying that he didn't want Natalie left with her. Of the others mentioned in the note, Brent is Rachel's brother, Teresa is his wife, and Ben and Sam are their kids, Rachel's nephews. It's clear there is hostility towards his mother, Barbara, and there is no other family member from his side mentioned. Later in court, he will again address this same group of people, while leaving out those you would think he would be closer to. And I am just assuming he wrote the date 4/11/13 incorrectly and was really referring to April 21st, the day of the murder. But back to the letter. At Randy's bond hearing, Lieutenant John Wood of Brentwood's Criminal Investigation Unit described the letter as an apology note. On cross-examination by Randy's defense attorney, he was asked if the note could be characterized as a suicide note, and Wood agreed, saying the wording made it possible. I disagree. He sounds more angry than anguished or suicidal. But more importantly, $87,200 in cash was found in the trunk of Randy's car. It was also corroborated through phone records that Randy had called his attorney the night of the murder. Obviously, his original plan was to run. So why didn't he take his car and run after the call to Betty? It could be as simple as he freaked out after Betty told him she would call the cops if he didn't put Rachel on the phone, and he just ran out his back door. Either way, to characterize this note as suicidal is quite a stretch in my opinion. After the so-called 12-hour manhunt, Randy simply came walking from the woods behind his home with his hands in the air and turned himself in without incident. Was he ever really suicidal? Possibly. I think it's more possible he was a bitter and vengeful man, steeped in alcoholism and God knows what else, determined to punish his wife. Was it because she called him on his shit? His immaturity, his drinking, possibly the loss of his job? Regardless, he does not take personal responsibility, and he only blames Rachael, the dead woman who could no longer defend herself. So of course it's his nagging wife's fault that this happened. He wrapped that up neatly with his vicious remark about being Rachael's third husband. Being married 3 times does not make Rachael a bad person. It makes her a human being. And maybe she did fight harder with Randy. After all, she had a child with him. She was older. She was secure in her own career. But maybe, like I've said, she was just tired of his shit. And he put her through a lot of shit. Aside from the bricks incident he was able to get out of in January, Randy was charged in February, just 2 months before the murder, with a DUI and implied consent. That is for refusing to take a breathalyzer test. Police said Randy was drunk when he drove his black Infiniti into a transformer station. Middle Tennessee Electric confirmed it led to nearly 200 homes losing power for hours. In just 3 weeks before the murder, a neighbor, Cynthia Rosenblum, who spoke with local news, said that she saw him running in the woods behind her home. He was wearing a black ski mask and had 2 dogs with him. She said she followed him and asked him what he was doing, and he claimed he was walking his dogs and got lost. She also told local news she thought he was carrying a backpack with a bow and arrow, and when she questioned him, he was almost incoherent, drunk or high on something. She said her husband had seen him doing the same thing, and they thought he was a peeping Tom. There was also a trespassing case against Randy from late March in Florida, but since it was an open case at the time, there were no details, and the case, of course, hasn't been pursued since. I wish we did have more detail about this charge, though, since it was clearly part of Randy's plummeting downward spiral and happened only weeks before he killed Rachael. These 4 incidents are alarming, but could still be easily hidden from family and friends. I think the biggest red flag also happened in January, while he and Rachael were attending his work conference in Orlando. Randy made a violent and disturbing scene at the hotel bar. One Dendreon employee shrugged it off at first and characterized Randy as drunker than a monkey. He said that he was slurring his words pretty badly and that he told him he needed to go to bed. But these drunken antics escalated into smashing glasses and screaming to anyone who would listen that he wanted to kill his wife. When several people tried to intervene, he just started throwing punches. He was eventually arrested for disorderly conduct and public intoxication. He bailed out the following day, but the anonymous Dendreon employee said he was advised to take a leave of absence, but he returned to work 3 days after the Orlando incident. That advisement is the only action they took after an employee of theirs made a violent criminal scene at a work event. Every Dendreon employee who spoke with the press has had to do so with anonymity, as they were threatened with termination if they commented. But one of those anonymous coworkers had this to say.
His behavior exhibited that he was losing control, and they really did nothing. I don't know what drove Randy to do this, but I truly believe he was not conscious enough to know what he was doing.
Maiden's ex-girlfriend, Larissa Farley, spoke with a local news station. She said she went to prom with Randy and had been friends with him for decades, and that she was in complete shock. She said,
"It breaks my heart. He looked hurt. Something has happened in his life to really snap to do something like this. I just see a lot of pain in his face."
I exchanged emails with Miss Farley, who was recently widowed and had moved to Nashville from Atlanta for a new start. She had thought to look up her old flame right around the time of the murder, but never got in touch with him. She insists there's nothing in his background, at least from the time that she knew him, that would have predicted this tragedy, though she stopped short of providing any real family details, like perhaps an alcoholic father who lived in another state, or the strained relationship with his own mother. Randy also had a sister living in Georgia at the time of the murder. It seems his own immediate family had scattered and managed to keep whatever secrets they had. From family and friends to ex-girlfriends, no one really understood this side of Randy. Miss Farley didn't know him as an adult married father, much less as a violent alcoholic, so her shock and disbelief is understandable. His bosses and coworkers at Dendreon, on the other hand, seemed to know what was going on but chose to ignore it. He even intimated to one coworker that he had had problems with substance abuse in the past, though he never specified the drug. The coworker said,
Dendreon knew he had a problem. When I worked with him, he was sober and he told me he used to have a problem. But there were signs.
To me, this sounds like run-of-the-mill corporate America covering their asses. Men who make the kind of money that Randy made can and will be excused for a lot, especially by colleagues who might consider it a family matter and not their business. Sadly, Rachael didn't seem to want anyone involved either. It's hard to guess what her motivation was, outside of embarrassment, but we also cannot discount that she truly loved this man. She wouldn't be the first wife in history to love a man and hope and pray that he changes. Personally, I have to wonder if she wasn't thinking of her father, a man who also screwed up and almost ruined her life, and that is why she tried so hard with Randy, hoping he would not spiral down the same rabbit hole, taking her and Natalie with him. After his arrest, Randy was charged with first-degree murder, child neglect, and 2 counts of tampering with evidence. The tampering with evidence charges are for the blanket Rachael's body was wrapped in and the apparent cleanup attempt. His original bond was set at $2.5 million, and he pled not guilty to all counts. In late June of 2013, his attorney, David Rabin, one of Nashville's best criminal defense attorneys, argued that his bond should be lowered. According to Rabin, even though $87,000 in cash was found in his trunk, there was no passport or anything else to indicate that he was leaving town, and there was also still close to $9,000 found inside the home. He further stated his client had had ample time to run if he wanted to, even acknowledging that earlier that Sunday Randy had spoken to Rachael's mother, who warned him that she was calling the police, and he still didn't run. Rabin argued that the high bond was actually no bond at all, promising that if it was lowered, neither his fee nor the bond would come out of the equity in the home the couple co-owned. At the same time, Betty Frisbie, Rachael's mother, brought a civil suit against Randy on behalf of Rachael's estate to stop him from using joint bank accounts and other marital assets for his legal costs. Judge Al Nations wound up reducing Randy's bond to just $750,000, which he immediately posted, and that meant he would be free for another year and a half, waiting for the September 2014 trial date. In late July of 2013, at another preliminary hearing, Circuit Court Judge Robbie Bill astonishingly ruled that Randy could reside in the home, the scene of the murder, while awaiting trial. District Attorney Kim Helper quickly spoke to the press and reminded them that the stipulations of his bail were still in effect, which meant that he couldn't go into the house without giving Brentwood police 24 hours' notice and that he must have an attorney with him at all times. He was also being monitored by a GPS tracking device, and the civil suit brought by Rachael's mother would also prevent him from staying in the home, as she was able to get a restraining order for all assets. Of course, that didn't stop Randy from going home to pick up the clothing and other belongings he wanted without permission, resulting in a contempt of court charge that was later dropped. The sheer audacity of all of this is infuriating to me. That a man accused of first-degree murder was not only allowed bond, but got it lowered enough that he walked free for over a year before his trial, with another good old boy judge ruling that he could live in the mansion where he murdered his wife. O.J. Simpson may have ultimately walked on murder charges, but his ass sure as shit sat in jail until the trial, and he didn't even confess. Randy did confess, without hesitation. And first-degree murder is a capital offense in Tennessee. While bond is considered discretionary, both rulings in this case are highly unusual, and I cannot help but believe there is both white and wealthy privilege blatantly revealed in these decisions. The Assistant Chief of Police, Tommy Walsh, also closed good old boy ranks by openly supporting the reduced bond and allowing Randy back into the home, saying the Brentwood police were still monitoring him with a GPS anklet and that they had, quote, a good relationship with the security team at the Governor's Club. This would be the same gated country club where neighbors were put on high alert after Randy hid out for 12 hours after murdering his wife, trying doors on different houses. I can't imagine his neighbors were all that keen on him living there for a year before the trial. Thankfully, the original bond restrictions kept this additional travesty from happening, but it won't be the last ridiculous favor that Randy gets in his cakewalk through the justice system. So Randy Maidens, with the help of a good lawyer and some questionable decisions from local judges, walked out of jail to wait for his trial, which was still a year and a half away. But his freedom only lasted about 8 months. He was arrested in December of 2013 after he was caught trespassing and knocking on doors at an apartment complex in Bellevue, another Nashville suburb. One of the residents, Avery Paulk, said the whole incident was really weird. Randy was knocking on his door and pretending to be a police officer, trying to gain entry, and he could hear him knocking on other apartment doors. The police came, but incredibly, considering he was out on bond for first-degree murder, they only charged him with public intoxication, and he bailed out the next day. And yes, District Attorney Kim Helper was able to revoke the bond after this, but the attitude of the police and judges towards the danger Randy posed to the community is very unsettling. With the neighbor Cynthia Rosenblum's story of him stalking around in the woods, the Florida trespassing charge in March just before the murder, and this last public intoxication charge that should have included trespassing, it's clear something else was going on with Randy. These incidents happened both before and after Rachael's murder. The concept of trespassing, which is to infringe on the privacy, time, space, or attention of another, aside from the obvious disrespect for boundaries, is also an indicator of violence, turmoil, and of course, a sense of entitlement. I believe Randy Maidens was conflicted with both deep insecurities and a wealthy man's sense of entitlement. And there is no doubt he was in turmoil, actually more like crisis, in the months leading up to Rachael's murder. But it didn't stop when he killed her. He kept up with these manic drunken antics even after her death. But then, quite unexpectedly, just 2 weeks before his murder trial was due to start on September 29th, 2014, Randy Maidens pled guilty to second-degree murder and child neglect. He received a sentence of just 25 years in prison, when the maximum sentence for a second-degree murder conviction is 60 years. And, as a convicted violent offender, Randy ordinarily would have to serve 100% of the 25 years he agreed upon. But his defense attorney said Randy, then 42, might be freed some 2 to 3 years early, based on good behavior in prison and when credit is applied for the time he had already served while awaiting trial. That could mean Randy might be in his early 60s when he is released, and that didn't sit well with Betty Frisbie and Rachael's brother Brent. They released a statement to the media through their lawyer. In the strongly worded statement, the family deplored the 25-year prison sentence Randy got, but said they accepted it in the best interest of Natalie.
There are no words or actions that can change the pain, void, and sadness that our family has experienced from Mr. Maidens' violent killing of Rachael. The pain and sorrow caused by this brutal murder was not only felt by her family, but her many friends, office staff, and patients. The largest impact will be on the lives of Natalie, Brent, and Betty. They live with this loss daily and will for the remainder of their lives. The total years that the family will live without Rachael are so much longer than those few that this man will serve for his evil execution of Rachael. This cowardly, violent murder of Rachael, our beautiful, remarkable sister, daughter, and mother, has left us with a void that will never be filled. Randy's punishment is far too light for the brutality of the evil that he alone has done. We would like to point out that our family would not have supported a plea agreement for this senseless and horrible murder of Rachael. However, we have supported the state in this plea agreement based solely in regard to Natalie's best interests.
DA Kim Helper sounded defensive in her statement after the family released theirs, which to me sounds like they were on board but then went rogue in the press. She defended the plea bargain with Randy Maidens.
The maximum sentence generally applies to individuals with a long history of criminal conduct. Every case is different. Every set of facts is different.
She said that the plea arrangement was reached after much discussion that included the victim's family, insisting that they were consulted during negotiations. As a part of that agreement, the 2 counts of tampering with evidence, the contempt of court charge for when he went back to the house without permission, and the DUI were all dismissed with prejudice, which means the state cannot come back and charge him with those offenses in the future. In addition, all assets within the Maidens estate were transferred to Natalie, who remains in the custody of Betty Frisbie. Randy was also given the opportunity to make a statement through his attorney, David Rabin, and he started by addressing his mother-in-law directly.
Betty, my words as I speak them now sound so hollow in light of your tragic loss. You are having to endure the worst pain any parent could possibly endure, and for that I am truly sorry. Every morning I hope to wake up from this horrific nightmare which I have brought upon our families. You welcomed me into your family, and I destroyed it. I wish I could trade my life for Rachael's and bring you back to your daughter and Natalie to her mother. I understand that it is not fair, nor will it ever be fair. Brent, I am so sorry for the loss of your sister. You are enduring unimaginable pain. Natalie, my daughter, I can never express how sorry I am for taking your mother away from you. You have lost both of your parents, and it is all my fault. Know that you were the most important thing in your mother's life. I have hurt the people I love the most, you and your mother. Sorry is not enough. And to Rachael, I promise to love you and cherish you, and I betrayed all of that. I will live with the anguish forever that you will never get to hold Natalie in your arms, or your mom, or your brother. No prison is worse than what I inflicted on myself. To all of Rachael's family and friends, I am truly sorry for all the pain and for all the moments that could have been.
As eloquent as the statement may be, it doesn't soften the blows of Rachael's loss or his ridiculously light sentence. I don't understand why Rachael's family supported the plea deal, and I hate to say it, but I can't help but suspect it had to do with money. Before Randy was even released on bond, Betty Frisbie had filed that civil suit to protect Rachael's personal and marital assets. I have no doubt in my mind she did do this purely for Natalie's sake, and I am not implying that she wanted the money. After what her own late husband had put her through financially, I have no doubt she acted quickly for good reason. But the family's statement that they agreed to the plea deal for Natalie's best interest is the only hint we get for their motivations. After all, he could have gone to trial and faced capital punishment or life in prison for first-degree murder. Not only that, but he received this sweetheart deal of 25 years instead of the full 60 he could have served for second-degree murder. I'm sure this is why Randy agreed to sign away all rights to his and Rachael's fortune. And I guess the security of Natalie's future was more important to the Frisbies than a longer jail sentence for her mother's murderer. We will never know the real truth, and maybe that's also why they accepted the deal, to keep the rest of this tragedy private so Natalie won't continue to be tormented with the details later in life thanks to public court records. A haven like Brentwood, Tennessee, can provide the seeming insulation from the real world, where a rich, white, drunken, and armed man can make a scene in a public place, and the police just let him call his wife to pick him up. Where a wealthy, successful businessman can spiral out of control without his company taking any real action. It is also the kind of exclusive insulation where a prominent young woman might do anything to save her marriage and her picture book life, even if that meant staying with a dangerous addict. We can't really know for sure the motivations for either Rachael or Randy, but we can be sure that hiding behind a perfect facade only made things worse for the Maidens, and especially for their daughter Natalie, who was orphaned by this tragedy. When I first started researching this case, I thought it was totally premeditated, especially knowing about the cash he had and the notes he had left. Now I'm wondering just how bad his alcoholism was, just what other pills he might have been mixing with the booze. Blackouts are unfortunately very real, and it's incredible what can happen that the brain simply doesn't process. There is just no memory created of the event. But since this never went to trial, we don't know for sure that it was a blackout episode, and that maybe that is why he got the second-degree murder deal. Either way, it still doesn't sit right with me. He brutally murdered his wife, shooting her 10 times with 2 different guns, one of which was a shotgun. This was a vicious, bloody act, and most certainly overkill, so I guess I could understand a heat of passion excuse, but it doesn't explain why he picked up the second gun or the $87,000 in cash he had in his trunk. Nor does it excuse the venomous language in the note he left behind. While simultaneously apologizing to Rachael's family, he also kept disparaging her even after he shot her to death, possibly in front of his own daughter. I believe there was a fight that spring evening between Rachael and her husband. A fight that she was probably used to fighting but was getting sick of, as his behavior had been escalating and in a very public way. I think she'd had enough of his shit. I think she threatened him, gave him an ultimatum, told him to get the hell out, or maybe was about to pack her own bags. And then Randy, as armed as any red-blooded Southerner would be, pulled a gun on his wife. I hope her back was turned. I hope she was walking away in disgust, resolved to finally leave the bastard, and the shots took her by surprise. But from the blood splatter evidence and the position of her body in the hallway, it would seem like she was running away from this man she no longer knew. A man no one really knew. A man that could shoot his wife 8 times and then go for the shotgun to really finish her off. A man that could leave his crying daughter alone in the house with her dead mother as he ran to hide. Southern Fried True Crime is written, hosted, and produced by me, Erica Kelley. I have so many people to thank in getting this show off the ground. I want to thank my friend, graphic designer Coley Horner, for Southern Fried's original artwork, and also my buddy across the pond, Rob Harrison of Gamma Radio, for writing and recording the original music. I couldn't possibly shout out all of the independent podcasters who gave me advice and encouragement, but just know that I'm extremely grateful to be a part of your community. I also have some wonderful friends I harassed into giving voice to some of the players in this case, and in doing so, I think they helped me give voice to Rachael. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank my husband Michael. From building a sound booth in our basement to bringing me endless cups of coffee, he is my biggest cheerleader, and without his love and support, I could never have pulled this off. I hope you enjoyed my first episode and that you'll subscribe and stay with me. I've got a great season planned, and I'm so excited to be on this journey. You can find me all over social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and my Twitter handle is South Fried Truth. If you have any comments or corrections, and especially any suggestions for cases you'd like to hear covered, you can email me at southernfriedtruecrime@gmail.com. And of course, if you enjoyed the show, I hope you'll take the time to rate and review it on iTunes. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, y'all take care.